welcome back to It Takes Two, the podcast where Naomi and I break down the hottest topics in entertainment and culture. I'm your host, Ethan.
And I'm Naomi. Today we're diving into a fairy tale that's turned into quite the nightmare for Disney, their new live-action Snow White remake.
Oh boy, where do we even start with this one? It seems like Disney's $300 million attempt to modernize Snow White has managed to anger just about everyone.
Right? From the casting choices to the dwarf's controversy, it's been one PR disaster after another. Let's start with the basics. Rachel Zegler, who plays Snow White, made some comments about the original animated film being extremely dated.
Which, to be fair, it is from 1930s, but maybe not the best marketing strategy to criticize the beloved classic you're remaking.
Exactly. Disney's trying to walk this tightrope between honoring the original while updating it for modern audiences. They've changed the meaning of fairest of them all to focus on kindness, not just beauty.
And they've given Snow White's name a new origin. Now it's inspired by a snowstorm rather than her skin color, pulling from the original brothers' Grimm tale.
But the biggest controversy has been around Zegler's casting as Snow White. She's of Colombian descent, and some fans have taken issue with that, given the character is traditionally described as having skin as white as snow.
Yeah, and Zegler didn't exactly help the situation by calling critics losers obsessed with maintaining the bloodline purity of cartoon princesses. I mean, she's not wrong, but added fuel to the fire.
Then there's the whole dwarf situation. Peter Dinklage criticized Disney for being hypocritical casting a Latina actress while still telling a story he felt infantilized dwarfs.
Right? He called it a backwards story about 7 dwarfs living in a cave together. Disney quickly tried to do damage control, saying they were consulting with the dwarfism community.
But then they decided to use CGI dwarfs instead of hiring dwarf actors, which upset performers like Dylan Postal, who saw this as a rare opportunity for meaningful roles.
As he put it, it's not Snow White and the 7 kind ain't a normal-sized humans. And then there was that leaked set photo showing Snow White with 7 people of various heights, races, and genders.
Which turned out to be from a completely different scene with bandits, not replacing the dwarfs at all. But the British press ran with it, and the damage was done.
This movie seems cursed. They had production delays, a literal fire broke out on set damaging one of the cottages, and then the actors' strike shut everything down for months.
And as if all that wasn't enough, the 2 stars Zegler and Gadot, who plays the evil queen, ended up on opposite sides of the Israel-Gaza conflict.
Right, Gadot is a former Miss Israel who served in the Israeli Defense Forces and has been vocal in her support for Israel, whilst Zegler posted "Free Palestine" on social media.
It's pretty remarkable how one movie has managed to wade into so many culture war battles at once. What's interesting is that Snow White has such historical significance for Disney.
Absolutely. The original 1930s film basically saved the company. It was known internally as the one who bought the lot because its success funded the studio for years.
Walt Disney actually had to put his own money into completing it, because the $1.5 million budget was astronomical at the time.
And it paid off massively. Adjusted for inflation, the original made about $4 billion. No pressure on the remake though, right?
None at all. But this opening weekend projection of $50 million seems pretty modest compared to other Disney remakes like Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King, which opened closer to $200 million.
I think this speaks to a bigger challenge Disney is facing. They've become target number 1 for critics of wokeness in Hollywood. Remember when they changed their theme park, greeting from ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls to dreamers of all ages?
And their battle with Ron DeSantis over Florida's Don't Say Gay law. Disney's been trying to evolve with the times, but in doing so, they've alienated some of their traditional audience.
The question is whether they're actually pleasing their newer audience, because from what I'm seeing, this Snow White remake has managed to upset people across the political spectrum.
True. Conservatives are mad about the woke changes, progressives are mad about the CGI dwarfs instead of actual performers, and now there are calls to boycott because of Gadot's involvement.
And after Trump's re-election, Zegler posted that Trump's supporters and Trump voters and Trump himself should never know peace, which prompted Meg and Kelly to call her a pig and suggest Disney reshoot the film.
Yikes. Remember when Disney remakes were just about updating the animation and adding some new songs? The Lion King remake made over $1 billion without stepping into all these controversies.
Although, to be fair, lions don't typically have strong political opinions. But seriously, I think there's something about Snow White in particular that makes this more challenging.
You're right. Snow White is literally defined by her appearance in a way that's difficult to modernize. Her entire conflict with the evil queen is about beauty and jealousy.
And the original story has her being rescued by a prince, which doesn't exactly fit with contemporary ideas about female empowerment.
Disney tried to address all these issues, giving Snow White more agency, redefining fairest, updating her name's origin, but in doing so, they've made the whole thing feel like a political statement rather than a fairy tale.
I wonder if there are some stories that just don't translate well to modern sensibilities. Maybe not everything needs to be remade?
That's a good point. Disney's already planning live-action versions of Lilo and Stitch, Moana, Tangled. I wonder if they'll reconsider their approach after all this Snow White drama.
I doubt it. The business model is too lucrative. 6 of their live-action remakes have grossed over $1 billion each worldwide.
Though not all have been hits. Dumbo underperformed, and that Pinocchio with Tom Hanks was panned by critics.
I think it speaks to how central these stories are to our culture that people get so upset about changes. These aren't just movies, they're cultural touchstones that people have deep emotional connections to.
Especially Snow White, it's literally Disney's first animated feature. It's like trying to update the Bible or something.
Speaking of updates, Disney actually put content warnings on some of their classic films, like Peter Pan and Dumbo, which critics saw as an overcorrection.
It's fascinating how Disney has become this cultural battleground. They're trying to satisfy everyone and ending up satisfying no one.
And you know what's wild? The Brothers Grimm version of Snow White is in the public domain, which is why other studios have been able to make their own adaptations like Mirror Mirror and Snow White and the Huntsman.
So Disney isn't just protecting the story, they're protecting their specific version of it and its connection to their brand.
Exactly. Snow White is a staple of their theme parks, merchandise, a whole Disney flywheel where box office success fuels toy sales and park visits.
I'm curious about the red carpet premiere they held recently. The article mentioned it was just 4 miles from the original 1930s theme premiere location. But unlike that historic event, this one had no outside press.
That says a lot about how Disney's handling this. They're trying to control the narrative as much as possible.
Do you think it's possible to successfully update these classic stories without stirring controversy?
I think Disney's problem is that they're trying to have it both ways. They want to modernize while keeping everything that made the original popular. Sometimes those goals are in direct conflict.
Like trying to make a Snow White who isn't defined by her appearance while still calling her the fairest of them all.
Exactly. At some point, you have to decide whether you're making a faithful adaptation or something new. This middle ground is where they're running into trouble.
It reminds me of how Disney tried to appease both LGBTQ advocates and conservatives with their approach to the Don't Say Gay law in Florida, and ended up making everyone mad.
Right. When you try to please everyone, you often end up pleasing no one. And in today's polarized environment, that middle path is increasingly narrow.
So what's your prediction for how this movie will perform?
Based on the $50 million opening weekend projection, I think it'll underperform compared to Disney's biggest hits, but it'll still make money. The Disney Princess brand is just too strong.
And despite all the controversy, many parents will still take their kids to see it simply because it's Snow White.
Though I wonder if some will skip it because of the political baggage it's accumulated.
I'm also curious about the review situation. The article mentioned early reviews have been somewhat positive if you don't count the online mobs.
That, if is doing a lot of work there. In today's world, can you even separate professional reviews from the online discourse?
Especially when sites like Rotten Tomatoes combine critic and audience scores. This movie seems prime for review bombing.
What's interesting is how much the conversation about this movie has been shaped by things other than the movie itself. Most people talking about it haven't even seen it yet.
Including us. We're discussing all the controversy without knowing if the actual film is any good.
Fair point. I guess we should reserve some judgment until we've seen it. Though I'm not sure Disney would want us to review it given our discussion today.
Hey, we're just covering the news. And it is newsworthy when a major studio spends $300 million on a film that's already this controversial before release.
True, and from a pure entertainment perspective, this saga has everything: politics, culture wars, fires, international conflicts, labor strikes.
It's a better story than most movies. Speaking of which, should we make predictions about what controversial Disney remake is next?
Well, they're already working on Lilo and Stitch, Moana, and Tangled. I think Moana has the potential to be particularly sensitive given cultural representation issues.
Good point. Though Disney did work closely with Pacific Islander consultants on the original, so maybe they've learned some lessons.
One can hope. I do think there's a world where these remakes can work. The Jungle Book and Cinderella were generally well received.
It seems like the key is finding the right balance between honoring the original and updating it thoughtfully, without making the updates feel like checking boxes on a political agenda.
And maybe accepting that you can't please everyone, instead of trying to make a movie that offends no one.
Well, on that note, we're about out of time for today's episode. We'll have to circle back once the movie is actually out to see if it lives up to either the hype or the hate.
In the meantime, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this Snow White controversy. Drop us a comment or reach out on social media.
And remember to subscribe to It Takes Two wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, I'm Naomi.
And I'm Ethan. Thanks for listening.